Everybody, this is Dream, and we have a nice little 5-game college basketball slate for you today. It starts at 7 p.m., about the same time the NBA starts. So we have 5 games. We have Minnesota versus Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is favored in that game by about 11 points. Texas Southern versus Kansas. Kansas is favored by a lot. Troy and Arkansas. Arkansas is favored by about 17 points. Pittsburgh and Northwestern. I actually don't have a line for that game yet. And then Seattle and Washington, which is a 5 points game. The 3 games that have the most points are Washington, Seattle, Arkansas, and Troy, and Kansas and Texas Southern, with Kansas and Arkansas being the top scoring teams, and then Washington. So overall, we have a pretty interesting little slate here. We got some good players. There's actually plenty of value too on the slate. Obviously, we need to have players under $6,200, and we have a few good players underneath that value in the forward position. So definitely like even a couple under that here at the guard position. But overall, I think the slate is pretty solid. I don't know that we should pay up for any super expensive players on the slate simply because there's blowout potential for most of those guys. But overall, let's get into it and see what we do like. Please like, comment, and subscribe below. If there's any players I leave off that you think are good, then let me know below. But I've gone through each team and I've tried to make the best decisions possible. Also, only try to utilize players that are starting, obviously with limited exceptions, and I would mention that if that's the case. So let's go ahead and get into the guards that I do like today. We're going to start with Chase Audich for Northwestern. He's the most expensive guy that I like on the slate for the guard position. He's just been pretty solid so far this season, and he has some upside as a result of the matchup where he should play 30 plus minutes and get a decent amount of blocks and steals, which really helps pad his fantasy point production. Then we'll look at Kevin McCullough for Kansas. He's at $6,900, and he's another decent play today. He had a bad game kind of against Tennessee, but overall this is a much easier game for him, and he should get back to scoring over 25 to 35 fantasy points in this one. Obviously, we would like him to get more than that, but averaging around 28 fantasy points per game, he should be a game where he should be able to shine. Then we'll look at Arkansas's Anthony Black. He should have a nice, solid game today. His minutes have really gone up recently as well, and his fantasy point output has absolutely increased, which has led to his price being higher. But it's actually lower than what it started this season. But it's going to stick around this room and probably get back up as the season progresses, at least before SEC play. He should have plenty of opportunity in this game to get a decent amount of regular points, which will lead to a nice fantasy output day. Then we'll look at Jamarius Burton for Pittsburgh against Northwestern. He should have some opportunity here. He's been pretty good this season. He's playing 30-plus minutes in all the games, averaging 28 fantasy points a game, and he has some upside in this one, especially if he could squeak out a double-double. If from that perspective, that would definitely help him. Then we'll look at Dejon Harris here for Kansas. He had a rough game, against Tennessee, but I look for him to bounce back in this easy matchup, and he's been playing pretty solid, and his price is pretty cheap for what he's been doing, especially in the easy games so far this season for his team. He should get plenty upside and have opportunity to get steals and stuff like that in this game, so he is probably one of my favorite plays that are under 6,250 on this particular slate. And then finally, Cam Tyson for Seattle. He is in a tougher matchup here, and he's not expected to win. But in 3 games this season, he's averaging 38 fantasy points per game, and he's the best underdog team. He's on the best underdog team, and he's the best player on their team. And so I look for him to have a pretty solid game in this matchup. Even if they lose, he should still put up big numbers. I don't think Washington has too much that they're going to stop him. So then we're going to look at forwards, and we're going to start with Jalen Wilson here for Kansas. Now, obviously, his price point is extremely high, so I don't love him because of that, but he is in a plus matchup where he should be able to get over 40 fantasy points. And so if you have the money, you can definitely utilize them. But again, that's going to require you to pay down a couple other places. Again, we have some good options here in the forward position as alternatives, but you do want to consider not paying up so much for a guy like that. But he is really good and consistent, so he is somebody you have to consider. Same kind of goes for Justin Mutz here for Virginia Tech. that he should be in a winning situation, and he's played fairly solid this season. He has a little bit of risk involved, but if he can get a double-double, as you can see the last 4 games, he's had at least 9 rebounds. And if he can get a double-double, then he'll definitely pay off here. And he definitely has a good upside. His price is a little bit cheaper than Wilson. He just doesn't quite have that upside that Wilson does. Then we're going to look at Keon Brooks, who's probably one of the better value plays on the slate from Washington. He's been pretty solid this season. He played at Kentucky before, so I've seen this guy play a ton. He's a very streaky shooter, which you can see. He doesn't shoot the ball particularly great, but he's going to get a lot of opportunity, and he does get rebounds and stuff if he hustles, and he is actually pretty decent at blocks and steals. So I do think he has some upside. The only real risk with him is the foul trouble situation, but on a weaker team against a weaker opponent, he should have plenty of opportunity to play well. Then we're going to look at Braxton Meh for Washington. He is the starting center here, and his price is just is capped because of his minutes. But if you just need a really good value play that can get you 15 to 20 fantasy points, he's a decent play to take a look at. And then finally, we're going to look at KJ Adams for Kansas. He's also a starter, and his minutes do fluctuate a little bit. You can see that his fantasy points are also a little lower than we probably would like. But overall, he has some upside in this matchup where he could play over 30 minutes and get more shot opportunities, especially in a blowout potential. So with that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. We have some good plays on the slate. I do think that it's going to be easier to fill in guard than it is forward, but I think you can find some good plays and then look for some of the weaker or the best players on the weaker teams to fill out the roster. With that said, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing again, and have a nice day, guys.